I sort of tend to believe that I was like born with a spanner in my hand. My mum always said that when I was bought toys when I was younger, that I would always take them apart before I play with them. I'd always modify them. So I think that I've just kept that going all my life, and I'm still modifying vehicles and building vehicles. I wasn't always into Mercedes, truthfully. Everybody thinks I was, and I wasn't. I got into Mercedes because I was always wanting to race cars. I wanted to build cars for racing. My mind was set. I wanted to have the 300 SEL, and I started to drive it, and then I started to get the feeling of this car and the way it handled. And what I loved about it was that it was sort of like the underdog car, but in motorsport history it did very well. I never wanted to build a replica of the Red Pig. I wanted to do my own version of it. We've been through some very good times and I guess through some very stressful and bad times. My name's Gary Greenberg. I'm from Belfast, Northern Ireland. I work in the film industry as a precision driver. I have a passion for building motorcycles and a passion for building race cars. Well, this place that we're in now is really where I've got to after many, many years of a passion for vehicles, custom cars, custom bikes. And this is sort of like my church, really. It's all my tools, and I come in the next day and I see my bikes in the same place and my stuff in the cars here. So basically this is sort of this is me, really, what's here. I was brought up in a real engineering environment. My father was an engineer. I was building cars at my mum and dad's house. Before I could drive, I'd been building 4 or 5 cars. I actually had this like natural thirst, energy to do it. It wasn't like it was, it felt like work. I just loved building these cars and I couldn't stop building them. I think it was an escape as well of the environment we were living in at that time. It gave me a sort of a way out of where we lived and what was going on. I spent all my life working on vehicles. Getting into the film came quite a bit later on, in fact, in my life. I started making a few movies and I was building vehicles, supplying vehicles, some motorcycles, and I sort of realized there was like a bit of a niche market in something that I had an interest in, and that was actually building specialist vehicles. For one film, what happened was they had a few problems, and I was always great at, sort of offering solutions. So in the scene, they had 2 kids stealing a police van, which obviously they wanted the kids to jump in and drive. Obviously they can't drive because they're 7, 8 years old. So with the director, who was a friend of mine, they said, Gary, have you any way you could maybe help us in this? Because normally what you do, you put it on a trailer. And I said, yeah, well, I'll build so I can drive it somewhere else. And they were like, what are you talking about? So I developed what they call a remote driving rig, and that's moved on now to what I developed, which is called the pod system, where you drive on the roof. So what actually happened was they said, would you drive this rig? Will you drive it? You built it, it's up to you. So I said, yeah, I'll drive it. So I actually ended up then driving everything that I built, and then that's how I got into precision driving. I mean, in a similar way, the bikes sort of come into it because what we do is when we set up a stunt or a chase scene where there's a motorcycle, going through the city streets, let's say, there's also another person on a motorcycle with a camera. So because I always had motorcycles, obviously it sort of came hand in hand. I ended up in a situation where I built a motorcycle to do it, and then I ended up riding it, which was, sort of similar to the way the cars were. The best feeling you get from motorcycle riding is it's you, the bike and the road and the elements around you. And also that you have to be concentrating. You're very close to everything. You're close to the car, you're close to the edge. It's very hard to describe the feeling unless you get on a motorcycle and you have that feeling. And I think it's very personal. And then when you're on like a road trip or you're going up the coast and it's just smoothed out and everything just starts coming together, that's a really beautiful feeling. And that sort of like glow that happens when everything comes together in the universe, and that's you on the bike, that's for me motorcycle riding. Yeah, so Titanic cycles really happened just organically because the new wave sort of bike culture came in. It was all about the bikes. People were talking to each other about the different types of bikes. There was no sort of group fighting about their styles and so on. Everybody together, and then the new people coming in, there's the surfers, the BMX people, who really just brought a lovely and new energy to what really biking is about. I was recently doing a TV series called Into the Badlands, and they told me at the start, and I was doing not only precision driving, but I was actually building and creating vehicles for that as well. It was sort of like a Mad Max style. And the showrunner said to me, "We're not having any motorcycles in this series or this season," because there were motorcycles in the first season. No problem, I said, and I didn't want to push it. But every day I came to work on a cafe racer, and he came out to me and said, "What's the story? I've been watching you come in every day with these motorcycles. What's the story with these motorbikes?" And I said, "Well, this is sort of the cafe racer style motorcycle that I've been building." And he said, "How long will it take you to build me 3 of those motorcycles?" In fact, he says, "How long will it take you to build me 6 of those motorcycles?" I said, "Give me 2 or 3 weeks." He says, "Okay, get me 6 of those motorcycles." So in every single episode of the new season, there was a motorcycle, and we just went on to continue to build more and more motorcycles for the whole show. So it's nice to have a little influence in that, you know, lifestyle influence, and bring it into your work. Yeah, so why the 300 SEL 6.3? The reason probably is that I really like the big car, really like the underdog, and the 300 SEL racing in Spa was the biggest surprise in motor racing at the time. This massive car that should never win came first in its class and second overall. When I started to read and investigate about this car, and I became very interested in the man who put that car together, a guy called Eric Waxenberger, and his whole mind was a mischievous developer in the Mercedes sort of company, and he developed and built that car. He got a big engine, put it in what was a pretty big car at the time, but an engine out of a limousine and put it in. And I just loved everything about it. I loved big car, I loved the underdog, I loved the big engine, and I loved that Mercedes engineering. So here is 300 SEL 6.3, and it's definitely my favourite car, as everybody knows. You know, this was the start of a high performance saloon that then led into the racing of the Red Pig. For me, this is just the most beautiful car. I mean, the twin headlamps, which are just iconic. This car was so far ahead of its time, and although this is only similar to my car, because obviously I've made a lot of modifications, the base vehicle is still the same. It has the high performance engine, it has the air suspension from factory, and it has the automatic transmission, which is a close ratio box, same as what I use in racing in my car. I got the car in Atlanta, Georgia. I was very lucky to find the car because basically what you're looking at is one of the most expensive and sought after Mercedes vehicles of their time. And it was lucky because the interior wasn't in great condition, but mechanically it was very, very sound. The fabrication was good, which is perfect when you're building a race car. I always knew that was going to be a lifelong project. I didn't set myself and say it was going to be built in a year. I gave myself my life to build that project. So I had to really have other projects that I could actually get some use out of. And then it started happening, and within the film business as well, I now use Mercedes AMG vehicles for my tracking. And I've got some other Mercedes now that we're going to use and we have been using for racing. One of my favourite cars here that we have in the workshop, which actually is not my car, not officially anyway, is the Ponton, which we, myself and a friend, raced in the Monte Carlo rally. And we were very new to the race. We built the car in 3 weeks before we drove to Glasgow, and then we started the race, only with all our tools, all our equipment in the car, and we raced the Monte Carlo, finished the Monte Carlo race with around 3,000 kilometres, and I think it's 370 hairpin bends we made. That's a lovely car, something that's very close to, I think, myself and my friend's heart. Well, what's done to the 300 SEL at the minute, I've mixed the sort of the peg drive style centre lock wheel system from a Le Mans car, I put a bigger brake system on it because the failing of these cars back in their day was tyre technology and bad brakes. So I've upgraded all those pieces to quite modern tech. I've kept the engine as it is. It originally came with air suspension, which is actually very in vogue at the minute, and I put a more modern, high-tech sort of control system in the car, but I actually am using the original air system. The interior is just stripped out, and it's just very retro race, in keeping with that sort of styling of the 70s. Yeah, I think I've found myself in a really good time to be living, when there's so much interest in the vehicles and the bikes and stuff that I have a passion for, and so many people have a passion. The internet has really brought everybody together, and we've all got to know each other, and we can share ideas. And I think that it's been really nice for me to got to this point in my life, and I really hope that I'm going to be able to do that until I literally can't ride a motorcycle or drive again, and leave this planet happy. But I'm definitely in a good place right now, and in a good time to be living what I do.